I'm going to do, this is my second take, because the first one I got so bogged down in detail, and I thought in the end, too much detail, and I've lost the meaning of my intention. So I'm going to try this again and leave out detail and a lot of explanation for the sake of the main point. When we come into a revelation of Christ and we start to see God differently, one of the things that we struggle with is, how do we reconcile the God of the Old Covenant with the God of the New Covenant? The New Covenant God is love, grace, peace. The God of the Old Covenant seems to be harsh and judgmental. I think the best way we can explain it is when John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Logos." That's the Greek word, logos, or in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning was the Logos. And I think the answer to our little dilemma is in the definition of the word Logos. Logos is a great word of great depth and richness. And it's referring to Jesus. And I'm leaving a lot of stuff out here, but I have to. But we could define Logos as God's nature, God's intention, God's wisdom, God's logic, God's feeling. And I know feeling is not a good word in Christian circles. We live by faith, not by feeling. But I think we should replace that with, we live by faith, not by emotion. Emotions come and go, but feelings are something deep within. So the Logos of God, who was Christ, is God's feeling. It's God's big idea for humankind. And see, Christ never contradicted anything that God said in the Old Covenant. See, John says, in the beginning was the Logos. In the beginning was the Word. So as soon as Genesis 1:1 came, the Logos didn't change feeling, thought, nature, wisdom, intention, idea. It's all the same. So Jesus shows us everything that was in God's heart and mind right from the beginning. So it's the same God. So I think this might help us, that in the Old Covenant laws, God's feeling, nature, intention, wisdom, logic, idea was his love, and to show us how to love one another, how to treat one another, how to relate to God, how he wants to relate to us. But it was turned into something else. It was turned into laws and legalism and religion. And when you do that, the focus then becomes on ourself, the power of God's nature, of God's wisdom, God's logic, God's feeling, God's ideas are stripped away, and we're left with pure hard laws which just feed the flesh. And then in the end, you get what happened in the Old Testament. You get nations that turn from God, being selfish, turn in on themselves and self-destruct. But that was never God's idea and intention. The idea of all those laws and those stories and those poems is to show us his love for us, how we are to treat one another, how we are to live in a civil society. So that always was God's Logos from the beginning. And Jesus showed us that when he came 2,000 years ago. So Jesus is God's idea. He's God's pattern, how to live, how to think, how to feel, how to treat one another. And it always was so before time in the beginning. So I hope that helps you reconcile the God of the New Testament to the God of the Old Testament. I've left out a lot, and there's a lot to think about. If I can just finish with this, just release this book, An Idiot's Guide to the New Covenant. If you can get that on Amazon, or you could look up Hall Author, one word, HALL author.com for all the details how to get that. And also my new ebook, A Covenant of Grace and Friendship. I unpack Genesis 15 there. So that's God's covenant to Abraham. And all those funny verses about burning torches going down, carcasses split in half, all that funny stuff that we tend not to understand, all that is so deep and rich and is describing God's covenant between the Father and the Son and Abraham, in which we have been made a part of through faith in Christ. I unpack all that, and it's an easy read. Both of them are easy reads. That's why it's called An Idiot's Guide. Even an idiot can understand it. No offense to you, the reader. So I hope that helps you.